Our top story this hour, it's on the front page of the Times, the Telegraph and the FT. It's Donald Trump's decision to reimpose sweeping global tariffs after the US Supreme Court voted that he needed congressional approval to impose taxes on imports. Trump said he was ashamed by the court and called two judges that he'd appointed fools and unpatriotic and an embarrassment to their families for deciding he had no authority to use the emergency law he had invoked to impose tariffs. We're talking about the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Let's discuss this ruling and the Trump response with Betsey Stevenson, a former member of Barack Obama's Council of Economic Advisors when he was president, and now a professor of public policy and economics at the University of Michigan. Betsey, hello, welcome to the program.
Oh, it's great to talk with you.
No, it's always good to discuss this with you. First of all, how surprised were you when the Supreme Court ruled so decisively, 6-3, against President Trump and the way in which he had used those International Emergency Economic Powers Act?
I wasn't that surprised. I mean, I know, and I think actually it explains why you didn't see the U.S. stock market move that much today in response to this decision. Some people might think, maybe markets don't care that much. I think that would be a misinterpretation, but rather, I think most people expected it was 75-80% likely that the Supreme Court would rule this way. So the information that people got was that we moved from something that was, 75% likely to 100% likely. So they'd already priced in expecting with a 75% chance that you'd get this ruling. And the reason I expected it is because if you look at the conservative members of the court, they have been saying in case after case after case that you can't interpret legislation well beyond what is included in the text of that legislation. This is that major questions doctrine. And so it would have been, really, I guess the only word for it would be hypocritical to say, you believe in that when it comes to Biden's student loans or climate policy, climate legislation, but now not in this Emergency Tariffs Act. So I wasn't surprised. I think we learned who the true conservatives are in the three conservatives that, ruled against. And then, of course, you had, the more liberal members of the court who just simply said it's not in the law.
Yeah, as the Supreme Court said, in the IEEPA's half-century of existence, no president has invoked the statute to impose any tariffs, let alone tariffs of this magnitude and scope. And President Trump must have had some legal advice accordingly, but he clearly decided, no, I'm going to push this and I'm going to go for it. And similarly now, he's saying other alternatives will now be used to replace those that the court incorrectly rejected. We have alternatives, great alternatives, could be more money, we'll take in more money. What do you think he has in mind then?
Oh, well, there are other statutes under other legislations. And in fact, the one that he came out today and said he was going to use, he said he's going to impose a 10% across the board tariff. He does have the right to do that for 150 days. It's a temporary measure. It gives the president the authority to do sweeping tariffs for a very brief period of time while Congress gets its act together to act. So he's going to do that. I think the thing that he's not going to do is get Congress in those 150 days to vote on passing real legislation that would cement those tariffs in place. So, that only takes us to July, and then the question's what next? So we have a lot of tariff uncertainty in front of us. I don't think, what this decision today was not so much about ending the tariff uncertainty. I don't think that happened. It was about saying, where is this Supreme Court going to draw the line on executive power? And so the president was told this Supreme Court is going to have a line. There is a limit to how much executive power you can take. Why did he get advice to do it? Look, he got to have the tariffs that he wanted without having to do the hard work of getting Congress to pass a law for 10 months. And now he's going to get, another sort of 5 months or 150 days to get the tariffs he wants. And he's hoping to just keep kicking the can down the road because he doesn't want to have to go through and do all the hard work of asking Congress to vote on something. He wants to be able to do what he wants to do. And in fact, he said that in his press conference today. He said, I can do what I want.
He did, Betsy. But at what cost or boost, as he might argue, to the US economy? He thinks he's doing great, even though some economic figures out over the last day or two showing a growth far lower than had been expected. He says, the people of the states should trust him. He knows what he's doing. But businesses, including some American businesses, are the ones who took this to the Supreme Court. So what do you think the cost might be of this stop-start?
Well, I think it's important that we got this ruling, and because it is important for the president to know that his authority is not unlimited. He's not the king of the United States. And even there, some people who have kings know even kings are limited in their power.
We do.
So, there's a limit in the power. And, I think that is really the story here. There's still a big debate. He thinks tariffs are ultimately going to be good for the United States. He's had 8 months since his April, or now I guess it's February, 10 months since his April announcement. But in the 8 months in 2025, what we saw was GDP growth was slower than in 2024. Unemployment was higher. And inflation continued without any sort of abating of inflation. So so far, he's not getting very good grades on his management of the economy. And he says, just keep believing it's going to come.
Yes.
But I think that the American public who are paying higher prices for things, they're seeing fewer jobs are available. Businesses are paying more for all of their inputs, and they're struggling because as they pass higher prices on to consumers, which they have to do because they're paying higher prices for their inputs, they're seeing consumers, struggling to continue to buy their things. All of this makes both consumers and small businesses in particular really unhappy. And I think that's why you saw businesses actually be the one to take him to court.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for your analysis. Betsey Stevenson, former member of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors and now Professor of Public Policy and Economics at the University of Michigan.